afternoon and welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C., and these are your headlines for March 12th, 2012. Does the U.S. imperial machine manufacture weapons in order to confront new threats, or does it manufacture threats in order to sell new weapons? We'll try to answer that question and more as the UN Security Council votes to extend its mission in Libya, and America's oldest active-duty warship left yesterday on its last deployment to cover the area, including Iran and Syria. We will look at the economics of war and defense with former CIA intelligence officer Michael Scheuer. And as the U.S. budget deficit is released for February at close to $232 billion, reportedly the highest ever recorded for a month, how can anyone with half a brain at least separate America's growing indebtedness from a bloated military budget that takes up more than 50% of discretionary spending? We'll look at the defense drain on America's dollars. Plus, it's reportedly the 10th anniversary of the U.S. anti-terror color coding system. Remember that? It was phased out last year, but now, look, here's the terror warning system 2.0.
The Nick Cage terror alert system will notify you by mobile phone.
Not the beast! Ah!
That's obviously a joke, but we'll give you our 3 cents on where terror warning systems got the country. Let's get to today's Capital Account. Today, you have the UN Security Council voting to extend its political mission in Libya. A resolution for a year was adopted unanimously. Now they're still debating and disagreeing over the conflict in Syria. Meanwhile, you have America's oldest warship, the USS Enterprise, there it is, leaving yesterday for its last deployment. Guess where it's headed? The waters covering Syria and Iran. Now, last week, you had rhetoric coming from Israel's prime minister that a strike on Iran isn't a matter of weeks, but also not a matter of years. You had U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta saying the U.S. will take military action against Iran if it has to. Last night, you had the former Mossad chief in an interview. Okay, this is the guy whose job for a decade was reportedly to try to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. You had him saying that Iran's response to an Israeli attack would be devastating. So what's really going on? You know, we spend our time on this show very focused on covering the economy, but in our view, you can't separate the economy from the issue of war, at least not when the U.S. spends this much of its budget on the military. Look at discretionary spending, more than 58%. If you're looking at veterans' benefits, that all ties into defense. And not when the U.S. is posting a record budget deficit. Just looking at the month of February, it was the largest monthly deficit ever recorded. That came out from the Treasury today. And the budget deficit, is on pace to exceed $1 trillion for the 4th straight year. So when war is such a big business and defense such a powerful special interest, and with the price of oil affecting everyone's lives, you really cannot separate the economy from war. And as retired General Smedley Butler famously said in the 1930s, war is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. And he was also, I should say, a retired Marine Major General when he said that. So here to really help us understand the situation in its entirety is someone who really is so knowledgeable on the subject. He's former CIA intelligence officer. He spent years as the chief of the Osama Bin Laden tracking unit, and he wrote a book on it too, on Osama Bin Laden. It's right there, called Osama Bin Laden, and he's going to really help us understand this. So I just first want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to get the chance to speak to you.
Thank you kindly.
Obviously, Iran is such a hot button issue right now. I just want to know what you think the reality of an attack on Iran is going to be, its likelihood, because just to put it in context, I mean, we heard Bush talking about this when he made the Axis of Evil speech. It came up again after the U.S. attacked Iraq. A lot of people thought that if there was an attack on Iran, it would come when Bush was president. So does that in some way mean that if it's gone this long without it, that it lessens the chance?
I don't think so. I think they're going to go to war with Iran because it's really not an American choice anymore. It's an Israeli choice and the choice of the American Jewish lobby. You'll notice when Obama wanted to talk about whether there should be war against the Iranians, he didn't go to the Congress, he didn't go to the American people, he went to IPAC and more or less pled for more time to make sanctions work.
So how do you separate rhetoric, though, from reality? Because I've seen at APEC, Iran has been the top of their agenda for as long as I've been covering it. And clearly there's plenty of documentation that APEC is, you know, arguably the strongest foreign policy lobby in the United States. But how do we know that that will lead to some kind of attack and what that would look like? Well,
they're not only the most strongest, they're the most corrupting. They've corrupted the American political system, both in the Congress and on the campaign trail. Otherwise, who would pay attention to them if it wasn't for money?
Well, can you give us some examples that you feel substantiate that point?
Look at Senator Lieberman. Senator Lieberman is the voice of Israel in the Congress, no matter what's in the interest of the American people, and he champions IPAC and the rest of those organizations. Do you think that the American people really want to go to war to protect the Israelis' interests? I don't think so.
I know as an American, I don't want to go to a war with Iran for really any reason that I've seen presented to me. But are you suggesting, because this is something that you bring up, from what I understand of your work and your writing, that you believe in launching some kind of a properly identifying and then engaging the enemy, as you've put it? Is your criticism of possibly attacking Iran and engagements the U.S. has had in Libya and Iraq a reflection that this is not the case?
No. Well, yes. I think the policy of the United States under both parties, no matter who is president, which party runs the Congress, is to intervene in other people's affairs, especially in the Muslim world. We intervened in Libya. We intervened in Iraq. We're going to follow the Israeli lead and intervene into Iran. And the bottom line is none of those countries pose a threat to the United States in even the remotely distant future. And we are going to further destroy our own economy for the interests of the Israelis, their lobby, and the people they control in both American political parties.
You know, I want to ask you, sticking to that, if you don't think that Iran is a threat to the United States, what substantiates that? Because, of course, the conventional wisdom is that it is, and that a nuclear Iran would be bad for everybody. Of course, we don't know whether it is a nuclear Iran.
Well, if Iran had nuclear weapons, they would still be directly under the targeting sights of the United States, of Britain, and of Israel. If they had a nuclear weapon, they could not defeat us. We could incinerate Persia whenever we felt like doing it, or whenever we needed to do it. If you look at Iran, Iran's energy industry has peaked. And with the economy it supports, it's declining. It's a country of a limited number of Shia Muslims surrounded by a vastly greater Sunni population that surrounds it and hates them, would rather kill them than Israelis or Americans or Brits. And finally, if you look at the map, Iran is completely surrounded by U.S. military bases that have been built in the last 10 years. In Cold War terms, if you will, Iran is completely contained. But I think we need to remember that Iraq was completely contained, and that didn't stop that war. The one caveat I would have on that, you ask what would happen if we attacked Iraq. The Iranians have a tremendous capability within North America, Canada and the United States, Mexico and the Caribbean, to conduct terrorist operations inside the United States. And I think they've built that capacity to be able to respond to an attack by us. They would not use it against America as a first strike, but they certainly would respond to it and really cause havoc in our country.
So what are you saying could be the blowback if the U.S. does strike Iran militarily?
Certainly terrorism within the United States would be one thing.
Do you think something on the scale of, you know, a 9/11?
I don't know what they can do in this country. They can certainly do low-level stuff. The stuff they do to the Israelis, or the Palestinians do to the Israelis, bombing schools and hospitals and blowing up IEDs in the road and that kind of thing, all of that can be done in the United States. We have 12 million undocumented aliens. We don't know who's in our country. And certainly the Iranians will exact a pound of flesh. They're not going to be pushovers. They're not Palestinians.
So do you think, because you're saying that you don't believe that Iran poses any threat to American citizens, that attacking is what does pose a threat to American citizens?
The attack on Iran will kill U.S. citizens at home.
At home, you believe?
At home. And in addition to whatever soldiers and flyers and Marines we lose trying to fight the Iranians overseas. It's an extraordinary thing, too, to urge the American military to go to war again when we haven't been able to win a war since 1945. not because we're not capable of it, but because our leaders won't allow the military to do what's necessary to win.
I want to get to that point. I really want to get back to what you said earlier about the economic threat, because this is something that we are an economic show.
Sure.
And this is something I've seen you, a subject I've seen you approach with other anchors before on the mainstream news. I just want to play a clip. I know it's been played and hashed out, but it's just such a good one, and I feel it's relevant to the discussion. So let's play it, and then I'll get your commentary on it.
To call the United States bankrupt, the United States is running humongous deficits, yes, but the economy and this mission in Libya are two separate issues.
They're not separate issues, ma'am. You're just carrying the water for Mr. Obama.
I'm certainly not carrying any.
So just her separating the issues of the U.S. budgetary situation and any kind of military engagement, it's obvious to me why you can't do that. But I'm curious, why you think that wars and defense will bring down the United States.
Well, I'm not sure it'll bring us down, but it'll be a vast blow against our chance of recovering to the point where we were before the crash of 2008. Listen, when you have a federal budget, what you can control is your domestic spending. Mm-hmm. We don't have the will to do that, but that's controllable. You can decide how much you're going to spend on roads and environment and airports and the rest of that. You can only control defense spending if you are at peace and you envision that peace lasting for a considerable period of time. Under both Mr. Bush and Obama, now Mr. Obama, we are out there cultivating wars, cultivating Islamic hatred for the United States, both Sunnis and Shias, and becoming increasingly involved in their business, which is what motivates them to attack us. So the budget people in the Congress and their bureaucratic partners have focused on the defense spending to be what gets cut, because they don't want to offend voters with cutting domestic spending. They can't. If they cut it for 1 year, they'll return it the next year and then some. They have to stop intervening abroad in order to stop earning enemies and causing wars, and then they may be able to trim the defense spending a bit.
But so are you arguing that because the United States is continually engaged in going to war and building up enemies, that is what substantiates this defense spending?
Well, you don't have a choice. If you're at war, you have to defend yourself. But you can certainly conduct your foreign policy in a way that saps the motivation of your enemies. You don't have to invade a Muslim country with oil like you did in Libya, or at least attack it. You don't have to invade Iraq. And there's a lot of things you don't have to do. Mrs. Clinton, for example, and Ambassador Rice at the UN and President Obama are out to kind of feminize the Islamic world. Now, when Professor Huntington talked about the clash of civilizations, I'm quite sure that he thought it would come from the Muslim side. But what's happening now is it's coming from Harvard and Columbia and the rest of the Ivy League schools who believe it's America's mission to impose secularism, feminism, and democracy on Muslims.
Or maybe they're just excuses for other geopolitical interests, too. I want to continue this discussion.
Sure.
We just have to go to war. We don't have to go to war for a few minutes. We need to go to break for a few minutes. I guess that was a Freudian slip, pretty appropriate. Nonetheless, we will be back with much more with Michael Scheuer. And still ahead, remember these? Well, they may have been phased out last year. The terror threats I'm talking about, the color-coded ones. But we are still recognizing 10 years of their existence. We'll give you our 3 cents on where the red to green days got the U.S. But first, your closing market numbers.
We just put a picture of me when I was like 9 years old on To Tell the Truth.
I have a confession. I am a total ghetto princess. I love rap and hip-hop music and Christian music.
I thought he was kind of a dick yesterday.
I'm very proud of the role that Al Jazeera has played.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete. You think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know. I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.
What drives the world?
The fear-mongering used by politicians.
Who makes decisions?
Considerable breakthrough has already been made.
Who can you trust?
No one who is imbued with a global missionary zeal.
Where are we heading?
State-controlled capitalism is called fascism.
When nobody dares to ask, we do. RT, question more.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking Iran, war, and with the constant rhetoric and the warmongering, we feel that it's very fitting and important to talk about when every day we spend speaking about the economy and the U.S. budget and a lot of dollars and cents. Obviously, war impacts a lot more than dollars and cents, but it's a really important piece of it. So former CIA intelligence officer and author of this book, Osama Bin Laden, is here. He's breaking it down for us. I should mention, too, that he was in charge of the tracking unit for Osama Bin Laden. He's as insidery as they come, and he's giving us his insidery insight. You know, I want to talk about, because before the break, we were talking about the defense budget. How much of it, because you're arguing if you make enemies, you have to spend money, but isn't the budget so much more bloated beyond any specific enemies? I mean, for a lot of the spending for Libya, Obama didn't have to go to Congress to get it. It's just sitting there in the budget, waiting to be spent.
Well, I think they moved it around within the budget. The problem for the American military, and I'm of course not an expert, is they spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of money on weapons we don't need. We don't need more submarines, we don't need more aircraft carriers, we don't need more stealth bombers or fighter planes that can't provide ground support. What we need is more Marines and more soldiers and more sailors. And so there's room within the Defense Department, certainly, or defense budget, to move around the money. But again, cutting the defense budget depends on cutting your enemies. And right now, Mr. Obama is creating more enemies than he can possibly handle.
With the mention of weaponry and weapons we don't need, I thought it was very interesting that the B-2 bomber has been retrofitted to carry these 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. Late last year, reportedly, the Air Force took delivery of them. Many reports over the years have said maybe this would be a prelude to the U.S. attacking Iran. My question: when you build a B-2 and equip it with a 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb that is maybe the only thing that can penetrate a deep nuclear facility, does that give you an incentive to, hey, try it out on Iran? Is that a motive?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. They certainly wouldn't build it if they didn't intend to use it. They used very large weapons of that sort in Afghanistan, and they weren't terribly effective. They dropped a couple on Osama bin Laden. But I think those are 7 tons, so these are quite a bit bigger. I think the point to look at here is will it work? You have a lot of people in the Defense Department who build the toys and they want to try to use them, and it's really irrelevant whether it works or not. It's kind of, will it blow up, and that's fine. The idea that you're going to pound the Iranians into oblivion from the air is absurd. Air power wins you virtually nothing. We saw it in Libya. The air power didn't win. It's the former Mujahideen who have turned eastern Libya into an Islamic state now, who won that war on the ground. So the idea that we're going to engage the Iranians, whether it's with smaller or larger weapons, and win is nonsense. We may put their program back a few years, but we will earn enormous hatred from the Iranians. We will earn terrorism in the United States, and we just may bridge the gap temporarily between Shias and Sunnis and created a 1.4 billion Muslim community that is really at war with the United States and its allies.
And in that scenario, would there be boots on the ground in Iran if you're saying that air power is not enough?
Well, so we don't have enough soldiers to do that. We have a commitment in Afghanistan. We're going to have to go to Africa to defend oil there, strategic minerals, freedom of the seas off of both of the African coasts. That's already set in stone. There's no way to avoid that. The only way they can go to Iran with boots on the ground and have any chance of winning is to restore the draft in the United States. And
maybe that would wake some people up.
Well, I think so. I think the people who argue for war, when you watch Fox, for example, and you see John Bolton, Charles Krauthammer, General Keane, the rest of them, they're safe and sound here in America. Their children are here, their money are here, their jobs are here. They can wage war with other people's kids. And that's where we are at the moment.
No skin off their actual back.
That's right.
Which I think is a major issue. Sticking just to this bunker buster thing for just one more moment, though, because one thing that was last week, a report came out that behind closed doors, Obama told Netanyahu, you know, we'll give you bunker buster bombs as long as you delay attacking until after elections. Then, of course, the White House came out and denied that. What do you make of what probably was reality?
Well, I think Obama is desperate to try to get the Israelis to hold off from hitting the Iranians. And I have to say that the decision whether for Israel to attack Iran is Israel's decision, not ours. They don't have a right to exist. We don't have a right to exist. Russia doesn't have a right to exist. But we do have rights to defend ourselves. If the Israelis want to go to war with the Iranians, fine, let them go. We should stay out of it. But will Obama promise them the weapons? Absolutely. Obama knows that if the Israelis attack Iran, we will be blamed for it no matter what we say. And if they attack Iran, the Iranians will conduct terrorism within the United States and almost certainly cause his defeat, because the prediction, you can predict terrorism occurring in this country if the Israelis attack Iran. So Obama is desperate.
So whether the Israelis attack or the U.S. attacks, you think it would be the same blowback
in the
for
Muslim
the US?
world? There's no difference. In the Muslim world, if the Israelis attack, the Americans give them the green light. Well, they're going to use American aircraft, American bombs, American money. And, you know, if you remember, when the Israelis attacked Lebanon in 2006, they ran out of ordnance. And we supplied them very publicly, very with a lot of fanfare. And the Muslim world doesn't forget these things. We assume Muslims are stupid, you know, and it happens they just beat us in Iraq and they're about to beat us in Afghanistan, so really how stupid can they be?
Yeah, doesn't really sound like it. I really appreciate you being on the show. We're out of time for now. We're going to have to leave it there, but it's nice to see you. As always, we appreciate your insight. That was Michael Scheuer, former CIA intelligence officer, also an author and professor. All right, time for some loose change. We're going to give you our 3 cents on 3 stories. Dimitri and Shannon here, per usual, because we have talked a lot about money's influence in politics, especially surrounding the Citizens United decision and super PACs. Well, now one billionaire says he and his super wealthy friends do not have sufficient influence on U.S. politics. Just to give a glimpse of Citadel, the hedge fund that he is the chief executive of, and their power in markets, how significant they are. This is him talking. This was actually in 2008 during the financial crisis when he testified, explaining.
Our broker-dealer is the largest market maker in options in the United States, executing approximately 30% of all equity option trades daily. In addition, Citadel accounts for nearly 10% of the daily trading volume of U.S. equities.
When you're controlling 10% of the daily volume of U.S. equities, I think you have a lot of influence. But the question, are the super rich not influential enough over politics?
It's funny because the way he actually said that was, if you later in his testimony, he was basically saying the people that really care about this country, the ones that are most responsible for the welfare of the nation, don't have enough of an opportunity to help. It's like the same Warren Buffett argument. I know,
it's good rhetoric. We just need to be able to help more. Just let us help you.
Right, exactly.
Do what we want to do in the financial markets.
Yeah, let's help. Let me help you. Let me just reach into your pocket. Just give me a second. Hold on. Let me just take, what is this? This is my money now. No, I'm helping you.
Yeah.
I'm helping you. That's great. And you know, we don't actually go after the hedge funds at all because we're more incensed with the idea that companies can be too big to fail and they have a government lifeline. Hedge funds don't qualify.
At least hedge funds fail.
At least hedge funds fail. But, you know, this is kind of absurd.
This is absurd, but this is...
This guy's being kind of ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and he donated to Mitt Romney. So what does that say? That he's a guy that's going to protect the interests of the super rich?
Well, I said, again, that's why anyone who votes for Mitt Romney is stupid.
Well, that's Dimitri's
So
take.
I'm just, sorry to our audience. If any of you vote for Mitt Romney, you probably shouldn't be watching the show.
Shannon?
I always thought my vote mattered, and now I know it doesn't.
Oh, poor Shannon has been disillusioned in the whole process.
Don't tell me you were going to vote
show.
for Mitt Romney, Shannon.
All right, let's move on. Because it's the 10th anniversary, and since we've been talking about war and some of the issues surrounding it and some U.S. enemies, well, it is the anniversary of, remember that color-coded system for terror warnings? It seemed like it was always orange, I felt like. At least that was my vague memory of it over the last decade. So here to help with our commemoration of it is a different anti-terror system, but crazy nonetheless.
Okay, class, when you see Nicolas Cage.
And we're even using Nick Cage in the classroom. For safety.
Go!
Not the beast!
Very good.
And for education.
A, B, C, D, E.
Nick Cage, he's overacting for America.
So I think that might have been a more effective way to warn people, because my memory of this was that it was just a bunch of hoopla that just was annoying. I mean, I don't really think it terrified the nation into worrying about being in a constant state of terror, do you?
I think that people have gotten bored. They need to find a new, more exciting way to be scared. And I think that employing someone like Nick Cage, who has a career of being kind of, exciting in that regard, it can help people get kind of involved in being terrorized again, kind of embrace the whole idea of fear and crouching under their desk and stuff like that. So I think it's a good move by the Department of Defense and Homeland Security to really...
I was going to say, so if you were, in charge of PSYOPs or whatever for the Department of Defense, and you were trying to build terror within a country in order to get them to support some kind of a war, Nick Cage would be a better way to go than any kind of boring color coding.
No question. They should have gotten his appearance in Moonstruck.
Okay. Shannon, do you have anything to add? Who do you think is more compelling, Nick Cage or horrible color coding that was phased out last year, I should add?
Definitely Nick Cage. I don't think anybody knew what the colors meant, and they always were either orange or yellow. Yeah. I think once it was red, and then always orange or yellow. Nobody knew.
And the bees is the severe one, and that looked pretty severe to me.
Yeah, it did look severe. It's a little like the boy who cried wolf, I felt, about the terror system, the warning system. We are almost out of time, but maybe we just want to say a few words about the fact that Brazil has actually hired Batman, a guy who is presenting himself as Batman, to help police some of their cities, rough areas.
Well, I remember when he was filming at Occupy Wall Street at Zuccotti Park. So I think that Batman needs to make an appearance to fight crime, but he shouldn't worry about the slums in Brazil. I mean, it's bad. He should go on Wall Street and harpoon some of these executives at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. That's where he should be investing his time.
There you go. He is popping up more and more in real life, though, Batman is these days. So, hey, that's it. Maybe you'll see him flying around, because that's all we have time for. Thanks so much for watching, though. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister. Give us feedback at youtube.com/Capital account. And from everyone here at the show, thank you so much for watching, and have a great night.